by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Great to be here with the Lady Mayoress, Nina Schrinner, Dr Christian Rowan MP representing the Premier, David Crisafulli, to Councillor Stephen Toomey and Councillor Penny Wolfe, to Air Vice Marshal Professor Hugh Bartholomew's OAM RFD retired, Chairman of the Reserve Forces Day Committee, to the Reserve Forces Day Committee themselves, to the Parade Commander, Captain Paul Luckin AM, to our Chaplain, Squadron Leader Bob Heathwood, retired, to the Parade Marshal, CPO Ken Browning, retired, to our bands, to the Pipes and Drums, National Servicemen's Band, the Combined Australian Cadets Band, also to our bugler, Cadet Warrant Officer 2nd Class Ashford McEwen, to the Catafalque Party from 9th Battalion RQR, to all of the reservists, past, present and emerging, to our NASHOs and the many service and veteran organisations and associations represented, friends and family, distinguished guests, boys and girls. We're here today to honour the memory of all Australian servicemen and women in the Reserve Forces and NASHOs who have made the ultimate sacrifice in defence of our nation, to acknowledge with deep respect their courage, their service and enduring legacy, a legacy they leave for current and future generations, and to recognise the vital contribution of reservists to Australia's defence capability and the critical role they continue to play in protecting our nation in times of conflict, crisis, natural disaster, and also in peace. And also today we acknowledge the unwavering support provided by partners, spouses, families, employers and friends whose encouragement and understanding make this service possible. 3 words sit at the centre of this day: yesterday, today and tomorrow. They describe the citizen, soldier, sailor and airman, the Australians who, when the nation calls, put on their uniform and step up. That is the commitment that we recognise this morning. Let me begin with yesterday. There is no story that illustrates this tradition more than Kokoda. In 1942, with our regular army divisions fighting far away in the Middle East, the Japanese advance through New Guinea was a direct threat to Australia. And those sent to hold the Kokoda track were not regulars. They were militia, young, many of them just 18 or 19, lightly trained and lightly armed. The regulars had a tongue-in-cheek nickname for them: the Chocolate Soldiers, or Chocos. It was assumed that they would melt in the heat of the battle. But as we know, they did not melt. Rather, they showed their nation just how tough and how brave they were. Yes. The 39th Battalion stood against experienced troops of the Imperial Japanese Army, and they refused to give way. When the line was at its most desperate, even the wounded soldiers who could still walk picked up their rifles and went back into the fight. They held until reinforcements arrived, and together with the AIF battalions that followed, they turned the tide of the campaign. Now that story is not foreign to this city. It's our story. Queenslanders of the 49th, the 25th, the 31st Battalions all stepped up in the Second World War. And one of them, Corporal Reg Ratty from the 25th, became the very first militiaman to win the Victoria Cross. And in the islands too, the New Guinea Volunteer Rifles served with honour. They were Australian settlers living in New Guinea, and they had volunteered at the start of the war in 1939. By 1942, they were the only Allied forces for miles. They watched the enemy's every move and reported back. And through sheer audacity and a bit of trickery, they convinced the Japanese that they had an army many times their size. But they paid a high price for it. Their memorial stands today in Anzac Square, where you began this march. They were reservists, citizen soldiers. And when the worst arrived, they were not the second rank of our defence, they were the front line. I want to speak also of the national servicemen, the NASHOs, because their service is far too often overlooked. Tens of thousands of young Aussies had their 20th birthday year decided by a ballot. And more than 15,000 went on to serve in Vietnam. Around 200 did not return, and more than 1,000 were wounded. At the Battle of Long Tan in August 1966, a single brave company of 108 Aussies held off a far larger enemy force through 3 hours of monsoon rain and gunfire and hell. 18 Australians were killed that day, and more than half of them were NASHOs. They were conscripts barely out of their teens who had not asked to go, but who had done their duty and fought bravely and stood by their mates. Too often they came home to silence rather than gratitude. And we owe them an honesty as a nation that was too slow in coming. Thank you for your service. Your service counted, and it still counts. Now to today. The men and women here in uniform of the modern reserves carry the legacy of Kokoda, of Long Tan, and of so many other battles. And your service at home and abroad is a gift to our nation and to our community. Sadly, conflict is never far away in the changing world that we live in. Since the Vietnam War, reservists have served alongside the regular force in many conflicts and crises. From East Timor and the Solomon Islands to Iraq and Afghanistan. We know that this is far from the only way that you serve. When this city flooded and bushfires and storms have come, you were there to support our community in its time of need. The city owes you a huge debt of gratitude. And to all of you, we say thank you. And to your employers and families who carry the load while you serve, this city also says thank you. I've mentioned yesterday and today, and I'd like to touch on tomorrow. It's wonderful to see so many cadets here today. What we honour and respect in our servicemen and women today is something that I know inspires the next generation. Choosing to put on a service uniform as a teenager is something that sets you apart from your peers. Your nation needs you, and I know many of you will go on to serve in the ADF, and I wish you every success with that ambition. In a few moments we will lay wreaths and fall silent for those who did not return. Remember that they were not professional warriors. They were citizens who answered the call. To every reservist and every NASHO here today, to those that are not with us or can no longer march, Brisbane sees you, Brisbane thanks you, and Brisbane will always remember you, lest we forget.
Thank you for your words there. I'd now like to call upon the host officer and chairman of the RFDP committee, Air Vice Marshal Professor Hugh Bartholomew, OAM, RFD retired.
Lord Mayor, Lady Mayoress and the Schrinner family, Premier's representative as Assistant Minister